Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to talk about some of the adaptations that occur to the cardiac system because of the aerobic endurance training.
Alright, to start off, let's talk about maximal heart rate. An athlete's maximal heart rate does not change depending on how extensively that athlete is training. So here is an example. Imagine somebody turned 20-year-old on February 1st. And for 6 months, this athlete trains extensively on aerobic endurance training. And 6 months down the line, he is aerobically fit, but has his maximal heart rate changed? The answer is no, because when he started on February 1st, when he turned 20, his maximal heart rate was 220 minus age, that is 200. And after 6 months, his maximal heart rate is still the same, 200. Let's talk about stroke volume now. Stroke volume is the amount of blood pumped per heartbeat by the left ventricle of our heart. And this does adapt to the aerobic endurance training. One of the chronic adaptations of the aerobic endurance training is the increased size of the left chamber. I'm talking about the lower chamber, which is left ventricle. Now, when the size of the left ventricle increases, it pushes more blood out throughout our whole system, which means providing more oxygen to the working tissue. Talking about end diastolic volume. So first of all, we have to understand systolic and diastolic. Systolic is the contracting phase, when the heart contracts and pushes the blood out. Diastolic phase is the phase when the blood fills into the heart. Simple. You must have also seen blood pressure such as 120/80, which is 120 systolic, which is the contraction phase, and 80 is diastolic, which is the relaxation phase, which means filling of the heart. Okay, so what does end diastolic volume means? As we just spoke about stroke volume, which is the amount of blood that gets pumped by the left ventricle to the whole body, that blood first gets filled into the left ventricle. Now that volume is known as end diastolic volume. Now let's talk about cardiac output. It equals to stroke volume times heart rate. Cardiac output is the amount of blood pumping through your entire body per minute. And as the equation of the cardiac output includes stroke volume, which does increase with chronic aerobic endurance training, the cardiac output increases too, or improves too, with chronic aerobic training. So there are two different types of cardiac output. Number one, resting cardiac output. Number two, maximal cardiac output. If you compare resting cardiac output between a very well-trained athlete and not very well-trained athlete, it would almost be the same. And here is why. Let's take some figures. So, a not very well-trained athlete is pumping 60 mils of blood per beat times his or her heart is beating 60 times per minute. So 60 mils of blood times 60 beats per minute equals to 3,600 mils of blood pumped per minute. Now let's compare this with a very well aerobically trained athlete. Now, the very well aerobically trained athlete will have lower resting heart rate. So here are the figures. The very well aerobically trained athlete is pumping 90 mils of blood per beat times the resting heart rate of 40 beats per minute. Now, if we multiply 90 with 40, we're gonna come out at 3,600 mils again. So, the cardiac output at rest of not very well trained athlete was 3,600 mils per minute, and also a very well trained athlete is 3,600 mils per minute. Alright, let's talk about maximal cardiac output now. There is a huge difference between the maximal cardiac output of a very well aerobically trained athlete to a not very well aerobically trained athlete. And here are some figures. So let's start from not very well trained aerobically athlete. Imagine this athlete is pumping, say, 240 mils of blood per beat, and the heart is beating at 90 beats per minute. So 240 times 90 equals to 21,600 mils of blood pumped per minute. Let's compare this with a very well aerobically trained athlete. Figures. So imagine this very well aerobically trained athlete is pumping 710 mils of blood per beat times a heartbeat of 110 per minute. So 710 times 110 equals to 78,100 mils of blood pumped per minute. The maximal cardiac output of a very well trained athlete and an untrained athlete is significantly different. Okay, 21,600 mils of blood for an untrained athlete and 78,100 mils of blood for a very well trained athlete. These were some adaptations that I discussed with you guys. These are not all. I hope you like it. Thanks for your time. I'll see you again with more knowledge and more topic. Have a good one.